There we go. You're muted, or we can't hear you.
Thank you.
There we go.
There we go.
Yep.
I thought I already pushed all the buttons that that were in my screen. Sorry. Welcome. This is the DNSOP working group meeting. We have 2 sessions this afternoon. For me, afternoon. For you, early morning or later in the morning. This session is 1 hour and 40 minutes. We have a packed agenda. My name is Benno Overeinder. My co-chairs are Suzanne Wolf and Tim Wyszynski. Our note taker is Paul Hoffman. We don't have a Jabber scribe, but the chairs will monitor the Jabber room. If you're not able to ask a question via the Meet Echo, use the Jabber room with Mike Cologne and then ask your question. We will monitor the Jabber room and we'll bring it to the Meet to the Meet Echo. We also will monitor the Jabber room. If there are interesting discussions going on, we will also bring it, or the summary, to the meeting room. I want to start, well, actually, traditionally, Tim will kick off with the chair slide. So Tim, can I ask you to present the DNSOP chair slides?
Yeah, can you just move the slides forward? Yep. Let's jump through them. We'll skip that one. We went through that one. That's the note well. I think we've all sort of seen the note well. Please be respectful. All that good stuff. And so the next slide. Okay. Yep. The agenda, it's just some updates on the old work and some current working group business and a little bit of new working group business. And so if anybody has any suggestions about that, just please speak up. So let's go to the next slide. So here's some document updates that we have. If we go to the next slide, we have 4 documents in the RFC editor queue. There we go. And they've been sitting there for a while, so that's fairly good. And we finally got 2845 biz in the same state, so I think I'm pretty happy with that. The next slide, we've got a few sort of updates on server cookies. There's some, as you can see, they've got some proof of concept implementations, and they feel they're ready for working group last call. So we'll probably see that in the next month or 2. And the catalog zones draft is, they're working on some interoperability testing, as you can see. And I think they've made some good progress, and before the next IETF meeting, they'd like to get some good testing going on. And we always love implementation, so we totally agree with them on that. So if we go to the next slide. And we recently adopted a bunch of this work, and so which was surprising even to myself. Some of this, I think there's a couple of very short, straightforward ones, especially Mark's glue is not optional, that I feel the working group can work through rather efficiently. And so that's kind of good. And I'm glad to see some of that. And so people seem interested in that. The first 2 are actually going to be discussed this morning. They're in the first sort of discussions. So good for that. So on the next slide, there's one that we updated. We did adopt the 5933 biz that everybody equally was unhappy about adopting this, and we adopted it as as well, and including the chairs. It was a bitter pill for everybody. But they have a quest for a code point, and that's part of the whole process. So part of this discussion came about also adopted. There was a whole sort of thread about, oh, let's sort of relax the registry, but I personally feel that fails to actually take operational considerations into account, to just sort of add more DNSSEC algorithms without sort of addressing any sort of operational issues. And we are an operations group, and we need to sort of address those type of issues. And failing to do so, I feel, is we're just laying down on the job. One thing that, and I sort of brought up a few times, was the great table that's in 8624 that Paul and Andre put together about, recommendations using the 2119 language. The problem is the IANA registries don't really seem to allow that sort of flexibility. But I feel that maybe the IANA registries we have right now need better guidance from implementers. There's some relevant stuff in what TLS folks did in terms of recommending implementation versus not, and so that may need a deeper dive. I'd love to see some folks sort of think about that and see how we can sort of go about that. But to just sort of make it easier to add more algorithms without really sort of thinking of the long-term consequences just seems like that, like just bad math all the way around. So just my personal opinion. So next slide. Oh yes, this one. We'd been talking with we went through, the chairs went through all the sort of current drafts back in April, and was looking for we were sort of thinking about this language thing, figuring this was going to come up. And I guess we were just sort of lucky we were ahead of the curve a little bit. And there are some updates in 8499 that we could do to sort of make that better. One idea was to just publish an update document, kind of like that terminology tour thing that made those updates. But that just seems like to me, that doesn't seem like, it just seems like it just seems weak. I'm not sure how else to say it. And I would prefer we just republish 8499 with all the changes we want to make and sort of clean that up, rather than having people chase through documents to find those those updates. But we're going to throw that out and and see what the working group feels about some of that. What's the right way to go with that? So we'll take you guys. Anyway, next slide. I think that's the bulk of it. There's our data tracker and stuff in our GitHub. What else we're working on? We actually, since we adopted a bunch of things, we're going to be busy for a little while. So I guess that's good. Also, next slide. So for agenda under current group, Mr. Fujiwara-san is going to talk about the fragmentation avoidance, which we hope we get more people reading, because we think it's getting pretty cleaned up, and we like to see it move along as well. The service binding parameter specification, that's the service B draft, as you all know, and they've been making a lot of progress, and that's been really great in what they're doing. And of course, DNS delegation only DNS key flag. And there's some new working group business on the next slide. These are for the next, pretty much the end of this session and the second session, the NS2, NS2T draft. I think Tim's actually presented that before, but we're coming back around. Request to actually update the resolver primary query 8109 draft. Paul's draft about IANA considerations, which I've sort of already vented on a little bit. DNS access denied error page. And that last one, probably at time permitting, is on this NAT64 optimization stuff. You'll want to look at the slides. Yeah, you'll want to look at the slides. That's all I can say. It's definitely people doing DNS in ways that we've never actually thought about doing DNS, for better or for worse. So that's what we've got on the agenda for today. It is kind of a long sort of session, so I'll step back and let people sort of get back to what they're doing, and I appreciate it. So thanks everybody, and thanks, and have a good morning.
Okay. So, thank you. Oh, I'm muted.
You're muted again.
Sorry,
Muted again.
I keep muting myself. Excuses. Thank you. I'd like to remind everyone the session is recorded, and also the blue sheets are automatically generated from the participant list in the Meet Echo. Okay, then I want to go to Fujiwara-san. 1 moment. I will stop sharing my screen and open another one. Okay. This one. So, okay. Okay, there we go. There we go. In queue. So Fujiwara-san, oh, there you are. Thank you. Fujiwara-san, you can talk now. I enabled your microphone.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, I'm Kazunori Fujiwara from JPRS. I will talk about draft IETF DNSOP avoid fragmentation. Next slide, please. These are differences between draft Fujiwara DNSOP avoid fragmentation 03 and draft IETF DNSOP avoid fragmentation 01. Please click this link to show differences. Main differences changed as working draft and added DNSSEC is a countermeasure in introduction and removed section 7.2 DNS packet size, moved details of minimum responses to Appendix A, and added reference to draft IETF TSVWT datagram PLPMTB. And next slide, please.
I'm sorry. The slides are not very well mirrored on in Meet Echo, but I'm not sure what's going wrong here. Well, going back and forth. Okay, sorry. Please continue.
Okay. And Paul and I submitted 01 draft yesterday. We added new text in abstract. IETF enables a new DNS server to send large responses using DNS and is widely deployed. And in order to sync with introduction section, and changed text related to TCP in introduction because TCP changes MSS value to avoid IP fragmentation and ICMP need flag attacks. And we used in-domain defined in RFC 8499. And in-domain and beyond grew in the additional section data. And these are very minor changes. And that's the current situation. And please read and review and comment. That's all.
Next slides. Are you still there?
Next slide, please. And please review and comment that draft.
Thank you. Are there any questions and comments on the draft? No? Okay. Thank you. Okay. I have to improvise now a bit to get the next slides up. Excuses. With our dry run yesterday, it went well, but for now, I can't seem to get my PDF correctly captured by Meet Echo. Let's see. Yeah, this one. Okay, can I invite Ben? Yeah, okay, I will give you. Hi, there you are. I will put up your slides. There we are. Yep, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. This is the latest in a long series of updates on the service binding and HTTPS records draft. Next slide.
I will rescale. Sorry, yeah, I will rescale the slide. And coming back.
So this is, I'm not going to repeat this all. These slides are mostly unchanged from previously, but service binding is a way to take a bag of metadata associated with some endpoint and make sure that it's all delivered together atomically. If you tried to separate all these pieces of information out into separate RR types and make separate queries for them from the client, apart from requiring a lot of queries, there would be no guarantee that you get coherent answers back. So this ensures that you can get a coherent bound set of information out of the DNS to help you connect to some endpoint. Next slide.
I do the rescale. Oh.
Improving my slides, thank you.
Sorry. There we go.
So this is just one of the motivating examples for this. There are a lot of different use cases, but one of the key motivating examples is to be able to take a domain, point it at two different CDNs, and have each CDN have a bound set of connection hints or metadata that are associated with that specific CDN. But one of the key reasons for this is that this record is the designated type to deliver encrypted client hello public keys for TLS connections. And those keys are only going to work if they're bound to a correct server pool. If you try to use them with the wrong server pool, you'll get a fatal connection error. Next slide.
Okay. Oh. Sorry.
That's okay. So this is this was previously called alias form. We've changed that name to alias mode to reflect the fact that there's only one wire format for this record type, but there are two different modes depending on the indicated priority. And in this mode, the record acts a lot like some variation on a name or alias. It also acts quite a bit like SRV. It's essentially a simple indirection. Next slide. This is an example of that bound collection of metadata. So in addition to specifying potentially another layer of indirection, this record now also includes a key value store with an IANA registry for keys that can convey all sorts of information about the specific target name, information that an endpoint could use to connect to that target name. Okay, next slide. Yep, thank you. So that was all background, which I wanted to get through as fast as I could. These are really the relevant slides for the meeting. So there have been quite a few changes since our last meeting. We've gone through several intermediate drafts, including a name change, which caused the draft version numbers to reset. So let me just talk down this list briefly. So some IANA updates. We now have assigned type numbers through the early allocation process. That's very exciting. We have changed the IANA instructions to reserve, the most important change is that half of the key range is now first come, first served. This was requested by some implementers who wanted an easier, lower friction way to experiment. So the hope is that this will allow dynamic experimental uses while ensuring that they can't exhaust the code point range, since the other half is expert review. We argue that this is safe because clients normally ignore unrecognized keys. So if somebody puts something strange in one of these keys that was allocated on a first come first served basis, most clients will just ignore it unless they've specifically been configured to have awareness of that key. Chain length limit is something that we discussed in the working group at length. A previous draft said something like 8 question mark, which generated a great deal of controversy. Essentially, the new text says you have to have some kind of limit, otherwise there could be loops or other abuses. But your limit must not be 0. So you must follow at least one step of chain. And beyond that, the draft does not attempt to specify, which, as far as I can tell, puts it in the same category as CNAME, which similarly doesn't seem to have a mandated particular chain length limit. So hopefully that captures the intent of the working group. There's a new key called mandatory. The text for this has generated a little bit of confusion, but the fundamental idea is that mandatory names keys that are necessary in order to use this RR. So if you look in the list of mandatory keys and you see a key number, so that those are all 16-bit type codes, if you see a type code that you don't recognize, then you should just discard that record because you don't have the information required to use it. There's a new feature that alias to dot means there is no such service as the one you're trying to access. It no longer exists or something like that. This is the same semantic as SRV and null MX, so hopefully that will be familiar. That was feedback from the working group. And a variety of small tweaks to the algorithms implemented by clients and recursive resolvers and TLS clients using the ALPN key and zone file parsing. Next slide. Well, okay.
Sorry, yeah, I was trying another approach. But, yeah.
Good. There have also been a bunch of less substantive changes. We've renamed a bunch of terminology here. Most importantly, the record name itself has now been changed to HTTPS. That was the result of a poll taken in January in the working group. And that is now confirmed in the early code point allocation. And there are a bunch of small clarifications and improvements on all different kinds of topics that we can talk about more if you want. Next slide. So the text still has several to-dos, which I think we can actually just remove at this point. Apart from that, it's time for working group last call and interop testing. We actually have a document now that you may have seen on the mailing list where people have been putting in notices of work on implementation, and I'm very happy to see a number of different major implementations coming online there. That's very exciting. So hopefully we can start to do some more interop testing. I know that some has already happened, but we'd like to get working group last call underway. That's it.
Thank you very much, Ben. I see there are a number of people in queue or were in queue. Please, you can request the microphone for questions. No questions. Thank you, Ben. So the DNSOP chairs are also thinking we're close to working group last call. For interop testing, I think it's good to have some coordination. Are you coordinating that, or do you want to delegate it to the chairs? You are in contact with open source developers and other developers. Get this done. Yeah.
So I don't think the authors have taken any specific steps to organize some kind of interop testing. I think that would be interesting to hear some advice on how that ought to work. I think we've just sort of been expecting that because the implementers consist of a range. We now have people who've committed to or publicly indicated that they intend to implement for stub resolvers, recursive resolvers, and authoritative servers, that hopefully those people will naturally be testing against each other.
Excellent. Good. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I know Tim or I or Suzanne will also contact you to see how that goes, or if we can mobilize the developers to do the interop testing, and so we can go for working group last call. Sorry, Suzanne.
No, just that interop testing seems particularly important for this. I think it's an important part of what the working group will be interested in, and not just and quite possibly not only DNSOP. So this does seem like something where we need to make sure we've got an adequate cross-area review.
Yeah, certainly there are implications here that go up into the application layer.
Right.
So, so we should make sure that that's covered in some of this interop testing. And yeah, it would be nice to have one of those little compatibility matrix things.
Yep. Okay. Tommy, please go ahead. You have the mic, Tommy.
Yes, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, so just on the topic of testing, so we at Apple have built an implementation of this in the next beta seed that we'll have of iOS and macOS. That will be using the official code points. So first, if anyone wants to test out what happens when clients are requesting, it should be as simple as just installing those on a device. And so, please try that out and let us know if you see issues there. That particular version does not, the particular version we have right now isn't doing a lot to influence application behavior, but that will also be in an upcoming beta.
Okay. Thank you. Alison, please. Oh, sorry, Tommy, are you're finished?
Sorry, it looked like it dropped me off.
Yeah, I saw you were dropped off, but
yes, sorry. So I was just going to say, also in one of the upcoming betas, we'll have everything to do following aliases one deep, doing the ALPN inference, and doing any alternative ports. So people can kind of test out that behavior and make sure that's working for their deployments. One other thing I just wanted to note that we have heard from some of the testing is that, of course, there are certain networks that do not play well with new RR types. Particularly, we've seen reports from Vodafone Italia that their networks are seeing some level of issue when they're receiving RR types that they don't recognize, and it seems to be affecting other DNS queries. There's seems to be some bug in their DNS infrastructure. So that's something that people should be aware of as they're testing. And if anyone has context there, we should let them know that we should make it safe for these new RR types. That's all.
thank you, Tommy. Next in queue is Alison Menkin.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, excellent.
Yes, hi. I'm Alison Mankin. Very nice, clear talk, Ben, and I'm very impressed with the progress. I was hoping that we could focus when we get to interoperating on operators, large DNS operators, because it'll be really important to see if they, to get them used to this very new type of record. And I think it'll be really valuable for adoption if it is available from those providers. So we deal with a lot of vendors, and we'll try at Salesforce, we'll try to encourage them, but I think we should also look at that as a goal for this working group in terms of making sure this is ready for lots of use.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you. So summarizing some interop testing. Also, well, as Tommy also mentioned, Apple is also testing this with a new code point. Interop testing, including application level, and then proceed with the process and working group last call. Is that correct? Did I miss something? Okay. please, working group, do review the document and send feedback to the authors, and we will continue. Thanks.
Yeah, we
Thank you,
definitely
Ben.
want. Yeah, we definitely want to make sure that there's been adequate review on this, as we said. So,
Yep.
if you've been waiting until it seemed to be mostly cooked, please review. And
Yep.
if you have an interest in testing, please do consider that. Thanks.
Thank you. The next presenter is Paul Wouters with his draft delegation only. Well, okay, there we go. Hi, Paul. I don't hear you yet. Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Yes, that works.
Okay, so the video didn't work, but the audio works. So that's important. Okay, next slide.
Yep. One moment. I will rescale it again. Sorry.
Okay.
That works consistently. Oh, next slide. And
so just a small reminder: the delegation only flag is a DNS key flag that you can set that basically indicates that you're only delegating in your zone. You don't sign anything within your zone. And so the idea is that you're sort of yielding power that you have over your children, and you commit this publicly in your DNS key flag, which means it's encoded in your DS records, so so people can track and monitor this. This also helps us support DNSSEC transparency by reducing the number of records we would need to log to see if the parent is suddenly doing something else. So next slide. So the biggest change, and I indicated it here by just showing the bit of the abstract.
sorry, I tried to move to the next slide, but and rescale it. One moment.
What's also the last slide? So.
Yeah, excuse me, but let's see if this works better. Okay, sorry.
Okay. So the main change, other than some spelling errors, is the change that talks about what data is or isn't allowed. So we had some convoluted language saying if you're crossing a dot or if you're having a zone cut, then those records should only be delegation records and glue and should not be signed. And Paul Vixie contacted me and said, like, you should just talk about answers, because that's really what you're talking about. You don't really care if you're crossing an empty non-terminal. You only care about that whatever they're sending is not an answer, but is glue records and authority section. So that is really the biggest change, which means that empty non-terminals are no longer an issue. And I think it clarifies the text. I did add some language into the security considerations, just in case, like sneaky answer section material would end up in the authority section or the additional section, so that it should be ignored there. So that was the main change, and I think the document is good to go, or like good for more reviews and more feedback. And that's it.
Thank you. Okay, any people, any questions, comments? No, I don't see anyone in the queue. I think, well, we would like to see more feedback and comments from the working group.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. Did you get also private some feedback and comments, or it's?
From the initial people, yes.
Yeah.
There are some people that do like the idea of like making DNSSEC a little bit more repeatable to the larger audience that say like, oh my God, there's one root key that can control everything. So there's definitely interest, but maybe because the target audience is also outside of really IETF working group participants, the interest within the working group is a little lower. But
Okay.
I'm looking at the chat. Is there a way to?
Oh, yeah, I'm
sorry.
also. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so please comment on the list.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Please. Please review the document. Send comments to the mailing list. So we adopted this document as a working group document. So the working group should also be actively involved in this document and send feedback. Suzanne, Tim, any other things we should mention here?
Yeah,
No?
I'm a little surprised there hasn't been more discussion on this. So it would be good to see some more.
Yeah.
Just because it adds additional bits of configuration and consideration to signing large or high level zones. So is doing the extra management a good trade-off?
Yeah.
In other words, who's going to implement this? And if you haven't, if you're an implementer and haven't thought about it, think about it.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Then we'll go to the next presentation.
Yeah, it looks like that one, Benno. It looks like that one is actually available from the meeting materials tab inside Mireco. That might be easier than.
Indeed. Yeah.
Worth trying the experiment.
Just received a suggestion, so I'm trying to. Give me 1 minute. Meetings. This one, edit. Okay. This one, yeah. Okay. No, I don't understand this. Okay. Excuse me. This experiment, don't try to solve a problem halfway. Okay, the next presentation is by Tim April. Parameterized name server delegation. There we go. I will share the screen. Oh, no, it doesn't work anymore. 1 moment. I can't share anything at this very moment. So Tim, can you put up the presentation? And maybe I can give you access to the screen sharing. I will allow you. Grant. This seems to work. No.
Tim, Mirka says you're sharing your screen, but we're not seeing anything.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Audio.
Permissions on my screen right now.
Yeah. I have audio and I can share screen.
I'm getting permission denied by system.
Okay. Yeah. Let's. I will try again. Again, permission denied. It seems. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Let's see if no, I can't share anything anymore. I'm sorry. Let's see
I'll
if
try one more thing.
Yeah.
See if it's.
Okay. Okay, I see some screens now. Yeah. There we are. Sorry.
No problem.
Thank you, Alex, for the suggestion. Tim, do you see the screen?
Yep, I do.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll. Oh, go ahead. So this is. I brought this up at the last meeting. There's been a few changes since then. Taking some feedback from the slide or from the list. Next slide, please. A quick overview. This was all presented last time. This is a new RR or two new RR types that allow for delegation from a parent to a child with additional parameters about the delegation. So it's basically enabling alternate transport for DNS protocols. This is designed to coexist with NS so that it can be rolled out as children and parents allow it to work, and then it uses the record format that Ben just talked about, the DNS SVCB HTTPS records. Next slide. There are the two RR types are NS and NS, or NS2T and NS2. The NS2 record is indicates a delegation or a zone cut and a delegation. The record can exist in both places. It ideally would exist in both places, but to aid in rollouts, it can exist in the child but not the parent. It would be signed in the child zone, not in the parent, very similar to how NS is done now. And it has extra parameters, which if you want more details about exactly what's in it, there's a slide and a couple more that will show the different values that are currently allowed. I hadn't noticed until Ben was talking that the name of the record, or the name of the types of records have changed. So I'm going to have to go back through and change it from alias form to alias mode, and same thing with service. And then next slide, the other record type is the NS2T, which is basically expands to the name server to target record type, where this would exist where there's not a zone cut. So you may use the alias form from one zone to another, and then that zone, since it's not a zone cut at that point, you would use the NS2T record, and it's basically similar to a CNAME for for the NS2 record. Very similarly to the SVCB draft, there can be a chain of these. I haven't added the language to the draft yet, but I was going to pretty much copy the hop count suggestions from the SVCB draft, so that it's up to the implementers of how many hops to actually to how many to chase when resolving. And then next slide. So going over some of the changes between the 00 and the 01. The main ones were the DS information has been removed from the record so that it can be signed, and then the IPv4 and 6 hints has been removed from the allowed parameter keys, because that's basically just the glue that would also exist in the parent at the same time, which leaves the next slide as the service parameter keys that are defined for these record types. So we have the transports, and then the template if you're using DOE, ESNI config, and the DNS TLS fingerprints. That's mostly a holdover, basically like glue for the TLSA record in the parent if this were to be rolled out. Next slide. And the other changes are mostly from the feedback on the mailing list. Of the NS2T record is no longer, or it's not very clear that it should not be signed in the parent. And then tried to just basic housekeeping of cleaning up things, adding a privacy consideration section, adding more clarity about when to expect these records. And then there was, I don't remember if it was on the list or in private conversations, but there was some talk about something similar to the CDNS key record type, but that currently putting that out of scope for this draft. And then a clarity piece of NS2 and NS2T should not exist for the same name in the same zone. And the final slide there's a few open questions. Thanks to Ben Schwartz. I thought I had replied to your email. I guess I haven't. I will do that later today. Basically, should the NS2T be a SVCB record in itself with the DNS label prefix? And then one of the big concerns that I've been trying to fight with on my own is how to help prevent downgrade attacks when the parent doesn't support encrypted transport. There is one more slide of just any questions, comments, or reviews are welcome. And then there's the open question I've had. I don't know if there's been any progress from, I was talking to Tim about this maybe last week, of whether or not it has been decided where this should live. Not entirely sure if DNSOP is the right place for this to continue working on.
Thank you. Okay, I see a number of people queued. Paul, please go ahead. You have the microphone.
This is Paul Hoffman. The question I had was exactly what you brought up at the end, which is where should this be done? DPRIVE, which is meeting later in the week, has a very different draft with a very different set of parameters, a very different use case which is narrower and such. It's not been adopted by DPRIVE, but I actually prefer this, the use cases for this draft much more than the ones that are being discussed in DPRIVE. But the chairs need to figure this out, because if we have these two going forwards at the same time and they have different use cases, that's going to mess everyone up. Thank you.
Okay. I assume you mean the draft of the DS signaling one, Paul? I think he just dropped it.
Yeah, Peter also has a question in the Jabber room. I have a draft in DPRIVE that solves the downgrade problem by using the parent DS record, which is signed. Are we talking about the same draft here?
Yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I did see Paul showing up again, but apparently he didn't get the mic. So next in queue is Ben, please go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, in addition to the DPRIVE question, I also just want to highlight that there is, in my view, as I've mentioned several times, considerable overlap here with the adaptive DNS proposal that is that has been in ADD, and in terms of so there are these three drafts. There's the DOT signal and pin in DPRIVE. There's NS2 here, and there's that one in ADD. I actually like them all, and I'd like to see if we can unify them all into at least a coherent set of proposals.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ben. So it's also an action point for the. Well, I won't count them, but 6-7 working group chairs of ADD, DPRIVE, and DNSOP to coordinate this and to make that we have one consistent document, either merged or at least consistent at one place. Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
I think Sam is now on the mic.
Oh, right. Yeah. I have a queue.
Was. Okay, Sam, can you queue again? In the meantime, we go ahead with. Okay. Yeah. Please go ahead, Sam. He's dropped. Sam, can you try it again? Can you speak now? You should be able. Yeah, I do hear you.
Sorry about that. I see that you're allowing these records only at the parent. You say it's preferred to be in both. And have you thought about the processing rules when a record is only at the parent?
Maybe I misspoke. It should be in the child, and it may be in the parent as well. Ideally, it should be in the parent, but to manage rollout.
Okay. What I read in the slide was that it could be only at the parent and not in the child, and I was worried about that possibility.
That I should fix that. It's authoritative in the child is what I intended it for it to be. And I will go back and make sure that's what it's.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next in queue is Jim.
Hi there.
Please. Hi.
Thanks, Gino. I was just going to say that whenever the working group chairs get together to figure out how to try and rationalise these three separate drafts, it would also be helpful if you could maybe try and settle in one working group to deal with it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Will do, and then make sure that there's some synchronization or coordination or update in the other working groups. Maybe by the chairs in a very short update.
Yeah, I agree, Jim. This is Suzanne. I agree that there should be one place for this for a coordinated draft, but I think it's going to need extensive cross-area review regardless. So
I'd imagine DDs might be involved in that as well, Suzanne.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So next is Puneet. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, two small comments here. One is on section 3.1, which talks about response size considerations. It recommends using eDNS0 buffer size of 4096, which is at the moment contrary to what the community is trying to do with the TCP flag day and the avoid fragmentation draft is talking about. So please think about that. A related note is, I think, looking at this, we should carefully consider how much information is necessary to put into these records and try to keep it to a minimum. Another point is there is another draft from Shumon Huck and I believe Paul Vixie around NS revalidation. I haven't thought about whether this also needs some discussion on that topic, but it's something to think about.
Thank you, Puneet. Tim, you want to react, or is it we take this as feedback?
I will look into both.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Puneet. Ben, again, please go ahead.
To clarify my previous comment, to say, I don't think that we necessarily need to reduce this down to one draft. I think that there are a lot of pieces here, and maybe it is too much for one draft. And we have a lot of authors who might have separate areas of expertise. But I'd like to see if we can find a constellation of drafts that work together.
Yeah, makes sense indeed. Yeah. Thank you. Paul, in next in queue. And you're dropped. Hopefully not by me. Can you reapply? Can you? Okay, there you are.
Hopefully, this will, I don't know. So I think what I'm about to say is going to piss a lot of people off, but I think it's needed. The different drafts have different use cases. And I mean, this touches on, I think, what Ben was about to say, but was too polite, which was that the different authors really want their own use cases pushed forward. And quite frankly, there are drafts that have not even been written that could be in this space because we were waiting on Deprive and, you know, on the previous work in Deprive to set up the use cases, and that just sort of got lost. When this discussion happens, instead of saying, oh, look, we've got a bunch of drafts, I really hope that the working group chairs actually say, oh, look, we've got a bunch of use cases that are different. Do we want to work on one? Do we want to work on a bunch of them? If we're working on more than one, can they be handled by different protocols? Again, this draft to me is a lot cleaner than the one that's being discussed in Deprive. And to me, that is an advantage. But the folks in Peter Van Dyke and folks in Deprive have a very specific use case that this would not follow. So please don't look at, please chairs, and that's the chairs here and the chairs everywhere, it seems like. Please don't look at these as drafts, but as use cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, I think we got a lot of feedback to the author, but also for the working group chairs to work on this and coordinate this, how to proceed with the three different drafts. We're doing time-wise good. We still have around 20 minutes plus 20, more than that, about 30 minutes. Not any feedback anymore for this draft. No. So the working group chairs will discuss this with each other. The ADD, DPRIVE, and DNSOP working group chairs will coordinate this, how to go further and make sure that it's either at least it's a coordinated way forward between the 2-3 drafts. Thank you. Then I want to invite Paul Hoffman for the last presentation for this slot. There we go. And I can also grant you screen. Do you want to have that? Or it seems to work now.
Sure. If you want to do video, that's fine with me. I sort of believe in, since none of us are seeing each other in the hallway in Spain right now, sort of nice to have humans around. And given, I can't tell if Meet Echo is showing my lovely face or not, but it doesn't really matter as long as you can hear my voice.
Sorry. You asked for sharing screen, but maybe if you can share.
I did not mean that. I'm sorry.
Send video. Yeah. I can. Yeah, I grant you video. Yes, there we go. That's much better. Yep.
Okay. So
excellent.
I see me, which means it's statistically likely that you see me as well.
Yeah.
So this is proposed new work, although it's really a revision of work that we finished not that long ago. Next slide. So RFC 8109 is about priming. It was published just a couple of years ago by the standards of this working group, and it explains how to do priming, for DNS with the root. So the working group worked on it. We got an okay amount of input during the during the discussion. We published it. And then a bunch of people asked questions after it was published. So this, if it was one question, I might say, oh, okay, well, maybe we'll just do a little. But in fact, there's a bunch of questions that people have been asking since 8109 was published. The first one is, well, what is the relationship with hyperlocal, or what is now RFC 8806, which was 7706? It seemed to me sort of obvious at the time, but obviously it's not, because a couple of people have said we should have covered it, which, okay. Also, was the question of, well, gee, I look at the priming list, such as the one from IANA, and it has domain names in it, but that's not, actually covered in RFC 8109. And so we actually need to say to people what is used in a configuration list. And then, of course, one of the favorite topics of this working group was, what about the TC bit? And in specific, if you send a priming query to root servers and you are not using eDNS0, so you have a 512 byte limit, the answers that come back do not have the TC bit set on, which shocks some people and is completely the correct thing for others. So something needs to be discussed about that. And then someone asked, and I should have anticipated this, well, what if I'm on a private network? What should I do about priming? So next slide. So the purpose of the draft here is to make small updates just to answer these questions. That is, keep the text as we have it, put in little additions for each of these questions, plus maybe folks in the working group will ask the questions that would have come up after we publish this now. But again, so the idea is keep 8109 and add sentences and paragraphs here and there. We can take advantage of this also to do something. RSAC published a document recently on terminology, or it republished that also as a BIS, where in that document they actually have much clearer wording for things that are in, about the root zone. So right now, 8109 talks about the root name server name, which is a bit confusing. RSAC itself, I'm sorry, for those of you who aren't familiar with all the ICANNs, RSAC is the Root Server System Advisory Committee, which is a formal group within ICANN that advises the ICANN board on root server stuff. But it's comprised of all the root server operators. So their terminology document now has a single name that they use for this, which is called the root server identifier. So we might as well throw that in to clarify here. So next and last slide. So if this is adopted, I think it can move quickly. I don't want it to move so quickly that people have questions after we've published the next RFC. But I don't believe that there's anything controversial here other than additions for what we've had already. And that's it for this. If people have questions or comments.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions, comments?
You folks are making my job as the note taker quite easy.
Very easy. Yeah, no, we will definitely put this also as one of the chair's actions to the mailing list later. But, well, as a chair, we would like to hear some support here already. I don't want to start the hum session here. Well, we have sufficient time, so we can do it as an experiment. But please, working group, is this something the working group wants to do and proceed in the working group as a document? Okay. Thank you, Paul.
So maybe
no, we will
there's no interest, but again, these are mostly responses to things that actually some folks who are in this meeting have asked me privately. So I would hope that they would want to see them documented.
Yes, indeed. So I think, yeah, again, chair head off, personal opinion here. I think it's useful work. So let's continue the discussion and see how the working group wants to work. Well, the working group wants to work on the document and proceed the document. Okay, I think I don't see any people queued for questions or remarks. The chat room. No. Okay, we will take it to the mailing list also, and ask for some feedback and if there's interest in the document to proceed. So then we come to conclusion here for the first session. We still have 20 minutes. Anyone for any other business? I shouldn't start this discussion here, but start this item. Otherwise, we'll see each other in 45 minutes for session 2. No? Okay.
2 is actually in a different room, so go back to the URLs in the meeting materials to get into the room for the second session.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, you have to log on again to a different room. Good.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, I see Dan York.
Speak up.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that I think a couple of people were saying, maybe since you have the time, perhaps you do take a hum to see if there's actual interest in the 130 people who are on here about doing something with this last draft from Paul.
Yeah.
Just a suggestion. There are a couple of people.
Okay, I do see. Yeah, thank you. I do see also on the Jabber. Thank you.
But I would also say at the moment you may be losing people too. So I don't know. Hopefully they've hung on in some moment.
Yeah. People, please stay on. We're now 120 something.
We can consider it a test of the hum functionality.
We can also test the hum function now. Yeah. But now, Suzanne, you are very good at it. Formulate
I haven't got
the
it. Let's-
question correctly so that we know where we hum. Where we should
Okay.
hum for, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so it looks like the way to do this is you open the hum button on the Meet Echo panel, which we have not tried. So we did not test because we don't use hums that often.
Yeah.
But we will go ahead and ask a question and see what happens. We've had discussion. We've had this presentation of this new draft from Paul Hoffman, and the question is whether there's sufficient interest to adopt it, review it, and eventually publish it. We will start the hum now. We get 35 seconds, and you should be able to see a little menu.
Yeah. It's running now. 30 seconds.
And chairs are not allowed to hum.
No.
But the participants should have a little menu of how loudly to hum.
Yeah. Maybe we can give Wes access to the microphone so he can comment on it. So Wes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so you also need to ask the inverse, which is, should we not adopt it?
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
All right. It looks like we did not have a lot of participants, hard to tell, but we had some loud loud hum.
It's a fortissimo,
yeah. So we now ask the inverse question.
Yeah.
Do people think that we should not adopt this draft? If so, please hum now or in the next 32 seconds.
Yeah. In the meantime, I'll give Stuart access. Grant screen. Or video. What do you want?
Yeah, let's let this run out. Okay, the hum is now over. One thing that I think has come up on the working group chairs list is whether 35 seconds for the hum window to be open is too long or not long enough. So any opinions on that? And the results, we have some positive hum middle range. So we will.
That we need the Meet Echo needs to have I'm not going to hum answer, because I think what happens when nobody answers, that the default is piano.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how to read the negatives, unfortunately, because I think a lack of hum actually means nothing.
Yeah, it's very hard to. There's nothing here that shows me, and frankly, I don't want to know how many. But if what you're saying is true, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Frankly, I wouldn't take this as anything except an experiment. But at least now we know how to use the tool. So thanks everybody that stuck around.
Yeah.
And we will be back shortly for the final 3 draft discussions for DNSOP at IETF108. See you soon.
Thank you. See you in 40 minutes.